Welcome back. All right, so earlier today, Dan Bilesma got the head coaching job in Seattle, which was the worst kept secret in hockey, along with Don Waddell being named the general manager and president of hockey operations by the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think it's a good hire. Now, what's interesting is the last time that Don Waddell got hired as general manager was by the Carolina Hurricanes, and I thought, really, you're going from Ron Francis to Don Waddell? Because Don Waddell had been the first general manager for the Atlanta Thrashers from 1998 until 2010. And there were some interesting trades made by him during that time. However, the Atlanta Thrashers were a team that was working on a budget. They were a team that lost a lot of money. They were a team that was just really poorly managed in general. And I think he showed that in Carolina. Had a much better run with the Carolina Hurricanes. From May of 2018 through until just last week, where he steps down with the Carolina Hurricanes because he's going to Columbus, and here he is. Now, his trade record in Carolina is pretty good. I've seen the criticism being that he didn't really fix the goaltending. I mean, goaltending's a tough position to fix. Ask Brian Burke about Vancouver with that. But the reality is that I think Freddie Anderson, good starting goaltender, hurt often. I think Kochetkov has a bright future. But honestly, I think he had more hits than misses when you look at his overall track record in Carolina. Starting with June 23rd of 2018. A pretty big deal for a guy who's just taken over as the general manager, although he had 4 years in the Carolina Hurricanes organization before that. And in between his time in Atlanta and then in Carolina, he was actually a pro scout for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So he trades Noah Hannafin and Elias Lindholm to the Calgary Flames. Coming back to the Carolina Hurricanes, Dougie Hamilton, Michael Furland, and Adam Fox. The rights to Adam Fox. Now, Fox had told Calgary, I'm not signing in Calgary. He didn't want to sign in Carolina either, but Carolina wanted to acquire his rights and take a shot at it. And I can't really hold it against him. When we look at Fox's track record in New York, it makes sense to at least go for it, right? So I think that trade ends up being decent for both teams. I think it worked out for both. Lindholm excelled in Calgary, and Hamilton excellent for the Carolina Hurricanes, right? And then January 17th of 2019, pretty solid move here. Victor Rask was traded to Minnesota because Nino Niederreiter had played himself out of Minnesota and ends up in Carolina. So in a one-for-one deal, Niederreiter for Rask ends up being an absolute win for Carolina. Rask had some moments in Minnesota, usually playing with that Kaprizov guy who's pretty good. But really, that's a good trade and a good move, picking up Niederreiter, who again didn't get along with, I believe, was Boudreau, who had him in the doghouse in Minnesota. April 30th of 2019. So they had the rights to Adam Fox for less than a year. They end up trading him to the New York Rangers, where, of course, he signs. Coming back in that deal, 2019 second-round pick, Mads Sogard. So that pick was traded to Ottawa. And the 2020 second-round draft pick, which was used to draft Noel Gunler. So I think Carolina did okay getting something for Adam Fox, who wasn't going to sign for them anyway, so you might as well get a couple second-round draft picks rather than losing the player for nothing when they sign somewhere else after you've lost their rights. June 22nd of 2019, they trade a 2020 6th-round draft pick to Toronto in exchange for Patrick Marleau, a 2020 first-round pick, which they used to draft Seth Jarvis, and a 2020 7th-rounder. At the time this trade took place, I was stunned that this happened, that the Toronto Maple Leafs were trading a first-round draft pick, and at the time, Leafs fans said, there's nothing to worry about here. It's going to be a late draft pick. It's not going to come back to haunt him. It's Seth Jarvis. Jarvis is a pretty good young player. And the reason for having to throw in the first is because Marleau's contract was not fantastic. So Carolina acquires that contract, asks Marleau if he'd be interested in playing for them. Marleau says not really, and so they bought him out. It was a really, really smart move by the Carolina Hurricanes. It showed that Toronto again was trying to they saved that cap space by trading Marleau, but having to throw in that first round draft pick. Looking back, losing that pick that became Seth Jarvis, that's a tough pill to swallow. June 27th of 2019, that same week, Eric Howell is acquired from Vegas by Carolina, going to Vegas, the rights to Nick Raw. So there's a loss there. So you have a win where you've picked up the Seth Jarvis draft pick, and then there's kind of a loss where you've traded Nick Raw, who's become an excellent defensive center, who's also got a little bit of offensive upside there in Vegas when they give him that chance. Also going to Vegas was a 2021 fifth-round draft pick. Erik Haula bounced around a bit in the league there for a while, didn't he? February 24th of 2020, Haula bounces around again. He ends up going to Florida. So this is in a deal, 6 months after the deal in June, or about 8 months after the one in June. But they get Vinny Trocheck from Florida. And so going the other way, Haula, Wallmark, Prisky, and Luostarinen. 4 players for one. And I would still say that Trocheck, worth it. Absolutely. Though he would leave and go to the Rangers. I think that was a solid move by the Carolina Hurricanes. Vinny Trocheck, a pretty good player and a good playoff performer as well. Of the 4 players that go to Florida, Luostarinen's the one that's still there, right? I remember at the time there were some who thought, hey, maybe Chase Prisky, and honestly, good young player they picked up, just never panned out at the NHL level. February 24th, 2020 again, so same day, they acquire Brady Shea from the New York Rangers in exchange for a first-round draft pick, which was later used by Washington to draft Hendrix Lapierre. Shea, excellent season for him this year with Carolina. And so while this is a Columbus video, the one thing with Carolina, a lot of defensemen on expiring contracts. I believe Shea is one of them as well. But yeah, that was a smart pickup, even though it's a first-round draft pick going the other way. July 22nd of 2021, a bit of an oof on this one in that Alex Nedeljkovic's rights get traded to Detroit. Coming the other way, Jonathan Bernier as well as a 2021 third. Going for the experienced goaltender, I get that. Part of the narrative, of course, being that the goaltending in Carolina never quite matched up with the rest of the team. Nedeljkovic going to Detroit, though. He had a good year in Detroit after that, and Nedeljkovic has been a solid goaltender since. But understandable, I guess he just played his way out of the Carolina organization. July 28th of 2021, this is a bit of an oof. Ethan Bear acquired from the Oilers in exchange for Warren Foegele. And then Ethan Bear would get traded to Vancouver not long after, and I don't think they necessarily get as much for Bear as they might have wanted to. But that being said, Warren Foegele is a very solid third liner for the Edmonton Oilers, really hard worker. And I do think that's a player that Carolina would probably want back. Not saying that Ethan Bear is a bad defenseman, but yeah, I like Foegele a lot. July 13th of 2022, they acquired Brent Burns and Lane Peterson from the San Jose Sharks, going the other way. Steven Lawrence, Makiniemi, goaltender, and a 2023 third-round pick. Excellent trade right there. San Jose looking to save on Burns' contract. What this did was it allowed Brent Burns to have quite the bounce-back season with Carolina, and then that, I think, directly leads to Erik Karlsson having a remarkable year for the San Jose Sharks in 2022-2023. So that's definitely tied to one another, but I do think that that's a trade that Carolina wins. Although for San Jose, they save on that contract, so I don't think San Jose would go back on that if they had a choice. And then March 7th of 2024, when we look at their draft record or trade record, I forgot to put who it was for. But yeah, so March 7th of 2024, Pittsburgh receives Michael Bunting, Ponomarev, who's a prospect, of course, from Carolina. And I mean that they drafted Ponomarev, not that he's from Carolina, obviously with the name Ponomarev. Cruz Lucius, I even put the full name because I didn't want to confuse it with Chaz Lucius, and here we are, I said Chaz the first time. It happens. And Koivunen, also part of that, along with a 2024 second-round draft pick, and Jake Gensel coming back to Carolina. And, of course, they want to keep Gensel. That's the plan in Carolina. I think that was a solid move. I think it worked for both teams, though. I think for Pittsburgh, I think Bunting was good for them after that trade, and you get other pieces as well. Both teams probably pretty happy. If Gensel signs that extension in Carolina, I think Carolina slightly wins the deal, but we'll see how Gensel produces next season if he's still in Carolina, and we'll see how Bunting does if he's still in Pittsburgh next year. You never know. This summer could be crazy with the cap going up and so many teams suddenly having space. You never know how crazy this summer might be. And on March the 8th of 2024, a trade that I think worked out okay. They picked up Kuznetsov from Washington, so they pick up that contract, which is not a fantastic contract. And Washington just took back a 2025 third, and a lot of cap space they pick up in that trade. Kuznetsov did provide them with some veteran presence and was good in the playoffs, but again, them being out early-ish in the playoffs, Probably part of the reason why Waddell's not there anymore. Who knows? Maybe if Carolina wins the Stanley Cup, he still leaves the organization. Anyways, sometimes you just have a GM relationship with an owner that's just no longer clicking. Now, his draft record's been good early in the draft. So 2018, he drafts Svechnikov second overall. He drafts Jack Drury 42nd overall. And Drury has quietly become a pretty good player for them. 2019, he drafts Ryan Suzuki 28th overall. Suzuki got into, I think, a few games for Carolina this year. We'll see if there's some NHL upside there. He's not going to be what his brother Nick is. But defensively, he can be good. I think there might be a good fourth-line center there. And then Kochetkov was drafted 36th overall. As mentioned before, Kochetkov, I think, is very likely to be the starter in Carolina as soon as next season. He's being paid decently, and so I think he's a good goaltender. 2020, drafting 13th overall, they draft Jarvis. That's the pick they got from Toronto. 41st overall, Noel Gunler being drafted there. And 53rd overall, Ponomarev, who was then used in that trade to get Gensel some years later. So the fact that Ponomarev's drafted 53rd overall and is part of the package he used to get Gensel, that's not bad. 2021, Jackson Blake drafted 109th overall. He did debut with Carolina this year. He is seen as having a lot of upside. And 136th overall, the oddest name I've seen at the draft, Robert Orr. So, you could call him Bobby, but I don't think anybody ever will. We'll see if he ever reaches the NHL. I had to put that name on the board. 2022, drafting 124th, they draft Cruz Lucius. So again, that's a late draft, well, a mid draft pick, mid to late draft pick as part of the package that gets you Jake Gensel. And last year, drafting 30th, Bradley Nadeau being drafted, and he's seen as having some upside there. May end up being a steal in that 30th spot. So not too bad at the draft table. Pretty good when it comes to trades. And contract-wise, there's been obviously the war with Montreal that took place. So they matched the offer that was made by Montreal to try to steal Aho out of Carolina and then sign him to an 8-year deal, and the cap hits $9.75 million. Considering where the salary cap's going, I think that's a very reasonable cap hit for Aho. But the praise for that contract has to be offset by the Kotkaniemi offer sheet that they gave Montreal. The Montreal said, take him. No, seriously, you got us. Take him. $4.82 million cap hit until 2030. So that's not a contract that's aged particularly well. That's an offer sheet that I think if Carolina could go back and do it all over again, they probably don't. But I understood what they were doing and why they did it. Kotkaniemi is a player that has all the tools, just hasn't been able to put it together at the NHL level consistently. And so that contract, to me, it does kind of offset the Aho contract. They didn't miss the playoffs, Carolina, the entire time he was there. That should be music to the ears of Columbus fans, and certainly was for Carolina fans, because at the time he took over as GM, Carolina had never been in the playoffs. I think 3 years in a row was the record in Carolina. It wasn't very much. So the fact that they're having a level of success in Carolina they've never had before, I think it reflects on good ownership, good coaching, but you have to give some credit as well to the general manager, and in this case, that goes to Don Waddell. So they go to the conference finals, do the Carolina Hurricanes in both 2019 and 2023, which is notable because Columbus has never been in a conference final. And 100-plus point seasons in the last 3 years for the Carolina Hurricanes. Columbus has been one of those teams that has been good at times, but they've never been great. This is a team that's never had home ice advantage in the playoffs, and we've said, hey, these guys are going to be really tough to beat. They've been good. They've been hardworking. They've had some solid little runs here and there. But the bringing in Don Waddell as GM, maybe this is the time where we start to see them actually really building. They've got some good young players there. There's some interesting decisions to be made by Don Waddell pretty quickly here, as we're about a month out from the draft. And so let me know your thoughts. If you're a Columbus fan today, are you excited about Don Waddell as the general manager? Are you reserved in your opinion on him? And does this board make you feel better or worse about the hiring? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I think it's a good hiring. I think it's a good move. And I think that this is probably just basically Waddell looking for a new challenge. Maybe a change of scenery being necessary. Makes a lot of sense. And I think this could work. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.